This weekend, hey, do we still even have a national park system? My question takes me to the Yorktown battlefield in York County, Pennsylvania. But not with an interest in the battle. Rather, my curiosity turns toward why in the world this place became a pivotal place for a battle. And the answer lies in the fact that Yorktown was a long-standing hub of colonial industry. We look at it now and it's bird-sprinkled forests, gorgeous lone trees on well-tended meadows, and tiny gravel paths hosting fife and drum reenactments by men in white breeches and red coats with blue facings. But how did it get that way? And let me tell you, everyone is glad they don't have to dust their breeches with chalk to whiten them, and they never think about the squashed cochineal bugs from New Spain in what is now Mexico that made red everyone's favorite military uniform color, and don't get me started on the indigo. But what really drew me here was that Yorktown, all the way back in the early 1700s, already had a large pottery industry. The wares it was turning out were in the category of stoneware, which is made of rough clays fired at lower temperatures and without the fine pattern glazes. But there was a commercial pottery industry there. And with only wood and a little clever chimney building, they were able to get temperatures up to around 2,000 Fahrenheit or 1,200 C, and successfully fire this stoneware. Yorktown is named for the city in England, much the same way places like Plymouth, Boston, and Portland took their names from cities that were left behind. And it was a major trading center built on tobacco. And so with goods and money flowing through it, churches were built and industries like potteries were also built. It must be emphasized that American pottery, both colonial and all the way through most of the 19th century, were utilitarian and low or medium-fired clay. This meant they were rough and often thick. Low-fired pottery is weaker structurally, so must have thicker walls to stand up. Thus, the fascination with the thin-walled porcelain pots and vases and teacups, thin enough to see light through, dominated the 19th century. But you can see evidence of one of the largest early potteries in colonial North America in historic Yorktown. It produced over 20 different items, including milk pans, bowls, bird bottles, mugs, colanders, porringers, churns, and chafing dishes. For what it's worth, bird bottles were placed under the eaves in homes during this era to encourage the nesting of small birds like house finches and sparrows, which in turn controlled the insect population. I'll include a link on social media and in the show notes to a site that shows samples of the pottery recovered from the site, so you can see what the state of ceramic art and industry was in early America. It was practical and in some cases interesting, skillful, and even pretty. But you'll also see why the porcelain from China and soon from Europe made such a showy splash. The past is right under our feet all the time, and our national parks can take us to it. So swing by historic Yorktown sometime for more than the battlefield lore. The everyday items of history have even more stories to share. Episode 157. More plates, you say? Let's make dining more complicated. Hello, and welcome to the History of American Food. This week, I'll be looking at when American got fancy and decided we needed more plates. Up until now, all the food had been on the table together, but that's going to change along with so much else. To see this rollover in dining styles, pull up to your place at the table and let's dig in. The first thing you need to know is that likely the closest us modern people come to dining in the way that is similar to the way people generally ate from the colonial age up into the first half of the 19th century is at large Thanksgiving and Christmas dinners, where everything is on the table at once except maybe the pies. And I realize buffet style is more and more common these days, but some of us have seen this happen. And it's the only remnant we have. That Norman Rockwell style of carving the turkey, and then we all pass our plate forward to have the slice placed upon it, that was how it was done. The other dishes, the potatoes, the gravy, the cranberry sauce, the stuffing or dressing, the beans, and so on, are all there. They're all out. And the bowls and the plates are so large that you pass your plate to the person sitting by the item, and they serve you. This is not Of course, a way of sharing and eating food unique to American culture, but in the mainstream here, these two large celebratory meals are often the last vestige that still lurks in our modern American customs that gives us a window to that past. And as with everything, in its heyday, there are reasons it came out that way, and as it developed, there were ways to do it more and less stylishly. Of course, these arrangements could then be used to connote honors and deliver insults. And in those days of do-it-yourself entertainments, the dishes chosen and their arrangements could be themed. They could even be puzzles or riddles for diners to figure out at a party thrown for the purpose. Sure, tablescaping may be a thing for weddings now, but honestly, they have nothing on the layered meanings an early 19th century hostess could dream up and deliver. Incidentally, I was introduced to this idea of using dish selection and arrangement as elaborate party themes at the Rockford Plantation in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. And you get a general sense of these table arrangements as cookbooks from the mid-1700s through the mid-1800s include diagrams of how to set up your table to present an impressive spread in a balanced and aesthetically pleasing manner. Before that, table dining wasn't done that way. And in the latter half of the 19th century, the people who were trying to impress other people had moved on to doing so by having servants carry the food around to you. The age of passing plates around a table laden with food had come and gone. So, as we are in the early 19th century, we get to look at the old way of doing things and the trade, technology, and market forces that were going to break it up. When our earliest colonizers arrived, they were either too poor to have grand dining spaces, and for those that did, it was done in multi-purpose halls that didn't have grand permanent dining tables. They had temporary trestle tables, basically foldable A-frames or sawhorse type structures, and you'd place a board on top and decorate it with cloths and such, and that would be your eating surface that could be easily put away so the hall could be used for all manner of other things. The grand permanent dining table didn't come along in American houses until our houses got first big enough, and then construction changed to include a separate dining room, which it did right about now. So you could eat at the kitchen table, literally the table in the kitchen where all the food prep was done. And in there, all the food would be placed there for everyone to sit around and pass their plates in the cozy intimacy. Everyone had their one plate or bowl. They might even be sharing a plate, and all the food they wanted as the meal progressed would be placed on that single plate. Now, if you had a big enough house and weren't eating in the kitchen and had your slaves or paid servants, then all the food would be brought to the dining table, and the diners would sit around and serve each other. A lot of polite chatter. Please pass this. Could you serve me another spoonful of that? A typical fancy table would have roast meat towards the head of the table where the host or honored guest would sit, having the responsibility to distribute the most important serving of meat conferred status. Side dishes like salads, rice with various flavorings, vegetables, various portions and preparations of fish, small game and poultry would also take up places on the sides and the corners of the table. Depending on the season and the company, there might be soups and bread and pies and dumplings of various descriptions, and always sauces to accompany things, whether in separate dishes or poured on as the food left the kitchen. And all through this, a single plate and a few utensils were used by diners as they would. In the early days, it was typical for the member of a very large party to even bring their own fork and knife and maybe a spoon. And if it was a very large party, they might even bring their own plate or bowl. I mean, you can't expect someone to have a dozen plates, much less enough for a truly large party. And so the first change we saw from this convivial BYO buffet atmosphere, which lived on in boarding houses and boarding schools for much longer, was that both plate and eating utensils were provided for all the guests, though some of the less well-off might try to augment their own dining service by making off with a bit of yours, hence the phrase, needing to count the spoons. But as trade with the world, especially China, started to show the way of the decorative plate, and many plates dining traditions gave way to even more ostentatious shows of abundance. More servants, more resources, and general one-upmanship led to the table being piled high with one course of a selection of dishes, which would be removed and replaced with a few small things and then replaced again with a second course or selection of even richer items, all different from each other and different from the items in the first course. As a result, the cookbooks of this era provided not just recipes, but seasonal menus that provided suggestions for what dishes would be possible at different times of the year, and how to divide them up into the 2, and soon to be more, courses. The offerings might be as simple as these from the prudent housewife: a supper of chickens fricasseed, wild ducks with rich gravy sauce, a piece of sturgeon, and minced pies for a January dinner. Or in March, one might find a dinner of roast beef with horseradish garnish, salt fish with egg sauce, potatoes or parsnips with melted butter, and peas soup. On the other hand, the Kentucky Housewife, which was a cookbook that was written as a bit more high society facing with her canned lobster and access to ice, offered this as a spring dinner: okra soup, baked shad with tartar sauce, mashed potatoes, roast lamb with mint sauce, and green peas. Please don't forget the Roman punch, which was offered as a bracing beverage before the second course. Then you would have a fillet of veal with brown sauce, macaroni, and there are a few baked macaroni casseroles in the cookbook to choose from. You would also serve a salad. Again, the selection of the salad is left to the hostess. And then there would be a pudding with cold sauce, lemon sherbet, coffee, and fruit. Though these cookbooks were published 10 years apart and really aimed at 2 different classes of cooks and diners, one had a single table of food and the other had a table filled and cleared twice, with a final offering of pudding, sherbet, coffee, and fruit. And when you look at it, there is a sense to the ordering of the food. Delicate, warm, and hot dishes like soup and fish come first, and the more robust hot dishes, roasts and casseroles, are second. Cold dishes like salads, puddings that can stay warm in the oven, frozen desserts like sherbets, and things that need no cooking at all like the fruit or nuts and cheese come last. Much of the ordering of the supper, once it began to come in courses rather than all at once, had to do with what was possible, what made sense in the arrangement of an 18th or early 19th century kitchen. And then you get the race between the table being cleared and refilled, along with the idea of more plates and changing plates, and everything becomes chaotic and ostentatious. I mean, once you start filling and emptying and filling and emptying the table, it's positively silly to think that I'm going to eat my pudding and cold sauce, not to mention my lemon sherbet, off the same dish that held my veal in brown sauce. In fact, I probably need to get some dainty dishes for serving the sherbet and up-and-coming iced creams. And with the arrival of tea sets from overseas, from China or London, I'm not going to be caught flat-footed serving my morning tea and after-dinner coffee in the same cups. It is time to get some more plates and cups and bowls and saucers. And if I'm going to spend the money to not only have enough plates to feed all 8 or 12 or 24 or 36 people I'm inviting to my party, you bet I need a piece of furniture to hold them all, and depending, to show them off. And so a new piece of furniture starts to appear first in kitchens and then in dining rooms. There's the dish dresser or kitchen dresser, where a single set of plates, cups, bowls, etc., can be stored and shown off. But what happens when not only do you have enough plates for everyone in one set, now you have another set? It's time for the sideboard and the plate rail. Yes, these items, the dish dresser or kitchen dresser, and then the sideboard and the plate rail, all start appearing in kitchens and house construction in the early 19th century. In this case, board in sideboard refers to the board that would be placed over trestles to make a trestle table and then become part of the phrase bed and board, meaning providing a place to sleep and food to eat. So the sideboard, it's like a side table that does other things. And the sideboard would not only contain the extra dishes and serveware, it would then become the place to put extra dishes of food or alcohol or the coffee service. And as servants started passing food around to diners in the next little while, it's going to evolve into the place where food could be placed when it wasn't being actively passed around. And you guessed it, as the number of plates and sets of plates increases, the sideboard's not going to cut it. Yes, the china cabinet is coming for us all. If anything, the 19th century is when more and more people can get enough plates and forks and spoons and knives as production and trade pick up. And so that is when we start to get the rise in the importance of manners. It's the end of the tablecloth as the hand and face wiper. The napkin or serviette arrives. And from there, the rules absolutely multiply and fractal out into local variations. Just which hand do you hold the fork in? Is the pinky up with the teacup? And if so, how high? And in the second half of the century, there will be more or less a war in the upper classes of how to be a sophisticated eater. And every time you travel, from your house to grandma's house, to that role in the Regency novel in London, or on a trip to Atlanta or Boston, every single time you're going to be doing something wrong. It's chaos, but also very judgy. And then somewhere around the end of World War I, in the first half of the 20th century, America starts to come to an agreement. But here we are in the early 19th century, so how to eat, how to serve food, and how many plates you need, and whether sweet pies are on the table with the roast meat or not, it is all chaos. Books are traveling from England. England is in an uproar over the invasion of those French chefs and their messes with all their sauces. And we as a country kind of dislike England, but we love our cider. We're leaning towards France. Thomas Jefferson is back in town, and his French-trained enslaved chef James Hemming is making his mark on the culinary world by serving macaroni pasta made in that fancy Italian gadget TJ brought back with him, and then baking it in a bechamel sauce. Dining rooms and French-style eating are in, so diplomacy over the dinner table is happening. And in the early 19th century, America just begins to entertain in a fine style. Yeah, sure, not everyone, but more people now than ever. So it's kind of chaotic, and people are reveling in the plenty of it all. Sure, we may not be Europe, we wear homespun and our bread is rough. It's not the refined stuff of Europe, but you know what? We have a lot of it. And that information is going to trickle back to Europe where things are getting tough. There's drought, and there's dark years, and there's cold years, and the revolutions and revolts against different monarchs are going to pick up. So just as America starts to get this taste for the high life, and we start to get access to gold to pay for it, Europe is going to start a series of crises where America can start to purchase European glamour for cheap. So next episode, I'm going to be looking at how hunting in America evolves. Much is the same if you're out on the edges of the expanding country, toying with the fantasy of manifest destiny, but turmoil in Europe is going to cause some interesting phenomena in both the hunting and eating of game in the early 19th century in America. Thanks for listening. Any email, questions, or quibbles will continue to reach me at thehistoryofamericanfood@gmail.com. Downloading this episode helps me know that you're out there, but even better than that are your reviews. Let more people know that you're listening and enjoying the show, or at least find it interesting, and I appreciate your messages however they get to me. Music for this podcast is Fingerlympics by Dr. Turtle, and you can find me on Threads, Insta, and elsewhere as @THOA Food. And all this information is in the show description.